Hello, hello, and welcome to Appalachian Arcana, the podcast where we bring you tales of the strange and unusual from Appalachia. I'm Cam Collins, and this is my co-host, Sarah Faulk.
Hi, everyone. Good evening.
So tonight, we're going to bring you a couple of different stories. I'm going to talk about one of our region's most infamous crimes, and then Sarah is going to lighten up the mood before we go home with some local ghost stories.
Oh, yes. Following with the theme of your true crime story. We're staying in the same city.
Area, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And making our way right back to Bristol.
So if you're ready, I guess we'll just hop right into it.
All right.
Okay. So tonight I'm going to talk about the Lillelid murders, if anyone is familiar with those. It was April 6th, 1997, just outside Greenville, Tennessee. The Lillelid family, Vidar, 34, Delphina, 28, and their two children, Tabitha, who was 6, and Peter, who was 2, were a family of Jehovah's Witnesses traveling home to Knoxville on I-81. Vidar and Delphina had married in 1989 and moved to Knoxville in 1993. Vidar was originally from Norway. His family immigrated to the United States in the 1980s and settled in Miami. And Delphina was a daughter of Honduran immigrants who was born in New Jersey. They met in Miami, got married in 89, and they moved to our area because they wanted to raise their children in a safer environment away from the drugs and violence of Miami. And they came here in the early 90s on a hiking trip to the Great Smoky Mountains. Fell in love with the area, and they're like, yeah, this is where we want to move. This is where we want to raise our children. So in 97, they had just bought their first house. It needed a little work, but they planned to renovate the upstairs into an apartment for Delphina's mom so she could move in with them. They just saved enough money to buy a swing set for the backyard for their children, and were planning to travel to Norway in a month to visit Vidar's family, which would have been the first time the children would get to visit their grandparents. So basically, we're talking about this little family who had everything going for them. The future seemed very bright. Up and coming, had everything they wanted. So the weekend of April 6th, they had spent the weekend at an annual Jehovah's Witness retreat at Freedom Hall in Johnson City, Tennessee. Friends had invited them after their church retreat to go out to dinner, but, with the trip upcoming, they kind of wanted to save money, and also, Vidar had to be back at work on Monday morning. He worked at a Holiday Inn in Knoxville, and Delphina was homeschooling their children, so she needed to get home and get their lessons ready for the week ahead. So after the retreat, they said goodbye to their friends, climbed into their minivan, an 1987 Dodge, and started driving home to Knoxville on I-81. At around 7:20 p.m., they stopped at the rest area at mile marker 41 off I-81. And that's where they ran into their killers. It was a group of 6 teenagers from eastern Kentucky. And this is quite a group. According to prosecutors and the media, kind of the ringleader of the group was an 18-year-old girl named Natasha Cornett. Natasha was from Betsy Lane, Kentucky, and this was a girl with some problems. She claimed that she'd had visions and spoken with angels and demons since she was 4 years old, and kept a journal with their names. When she was freshman in high school, she was hospitalized for bipolar disorder. And basically from everything I've read in documentaries and things like that, she was released from the hospital earlier than the doctors recommended because the family didn't have insurance. But yeah, the girl, she had some problems. Reportedly, she had an eating disorder. She cut her arms with razors to, quote, relieve her pain, according to her mother. And she was just a goth, okay? Let's just go ahead and let's address this right now. She wore all black. She had piercings. Yeah, I know. She referred to herself as Satan's daughter. And, reportedly used various drugs, including heroin, ecstasy, and cocaine. She had covered the walls of her bedroom with graffiti consisting of "I hate the world" and similar sentiments. She was a girl with some issues.
She's arrested at age 14 for forgery of checks.
Forging checks. She also, at the same age, threatened her mother with a knife and was arrested for that, but her mother dropped the charges. And her mom seems to have really, tried to get her help, but, they were a poor family. There just wasn't much help to be had. Her friends were Karen Howell, who was 17. She was Natasha's best friend, and Natasha referred to her as her soulmate. Karen was also fascinated with the occult and claimed that she had visions. Had a troubled upbringing. Her early childhood was characterized by violent fights between her parents, and she had said that she was sexually abused by an uncle and a cousin when she was between the ages of 5 and 10. And Karen, she was also into the occult and self-mutilation, and reportedly had made 4 suicide attempts. Yeah, troubled kids. The others, Edward Dean Mullins was 19, and he was dating Natasha Cornett. He also lived at home with his mom, but didn't really have, any kind of criminal record or anything like that. Sometimes he wore black eye makeup, according to some of the articles I've read. Ooh, scary. And had been, about a week before this incident happened, was seen being led around a grocery store in Pikeville, Kentucky, on a dog chain by Natasha Cornett. Joseph Lance Risner was 20. He was dating the other girl, Karen Howell. He had a history of using marijuana and LSD, according to reports. Also had a bit of a troubled childhood. He claimed that he had had sexual relationships with 2 of his babysitters at age 12. Risner had joined the Army in 1995, but was discharged when he tested positive for marijuana. Crystal Rena Sturgill was the other girl. She was 18 and a newcomer to the group. Also had been sexually abused and was no longer welcome at home because she reported her stepfather for abuse. And the last and youngest was Jason Blake Bryant, who was 14. He was also new to the group. He was a runaway with an IQ reportedly of around 85 and the social skills of an 11-year-old. According to some reports, Natasha Cornett had picked him up on a street corner and offered him bourbon and kisses, and that's how she got him to join their little group. And he had allowed her to carve her initials into his arm. So wow. You've got this sort of little codependent group of friends, obviously outcast. They obviously have a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And like the Lillard family, they'd had a busy weekend. They spent Friday, April 4th at the Collie Motel in Pikeville. Reportedly, they were, hanging out in a motel, drinking and getting high. According to news reports and local rumors, the kids conducted a seance and or satanic ritual. Who knows? Satanic ritual. One witness at the trial later had reported seeing candles, razor blades, and a Ouija board in the room. They attempted to burn 666 into the carpet of the room, which I'm sure made the motel manager real happy.
Yeah.
And people at the motel report that Cornette was crying and talking with Hal about fighting with her mom, how she hated Kentucky and wanted to get out. And over the course of the weekend, police and prosecutors say that it was here, this night, Friday night, at the motel room when they, basically came up with a plan to go on a cross-country murder spree, a la Natural Born Killers, which was one of Natasha Cornette's favorite movies. So, I don't know. It's kind of interesting because you have to know the time, right? This was the 90s, kind of post-satanic panic, but in our area, kind of also not really post.
Exactly.
And it's really clear from a lot of the things that they're reported doing. It was late 90s. Kids, poor kids in Eastern Kentucky did not have a lot of access to the internet, which was still a very young animal anyway at this time. They knew nothing about the actual Church of Satan or anything like that. They're basically basing everything they're doing on, satanic videos about satanic panic and all these things Satanists are supposed to do. Is kind of my takeaway, having grown up here.
Too.
So. Natasha Cornette's mother said that they stopped by her trailer on Saturday, the next day, Saturday the 5th of April, on their way to the motel, from the motel to a bonfire at a remote campground called 40 Acre Field. Natasha told her mother they were, quote, going to start the Armageddon. And she told the Knoxville News-Sentinel later, Karen turned around and looked at me, and she said, the end of time is coming. I said, oh, and that's it, that's all she said. So, Mom was not impressed by this, clearly,
Clearly not.
Yeah. So, anyway, the kids go to this campground, and they were seen there, around a campfire, hanging out. And sometime either that night or earlier the next morning, they apparently robbed a couple of homes in Paintsville, Kentucky. They reportedly stole 2 guns, a 9mm and a .25 caliber, one from Karen Howell's dad's house, and one from the house of a friend. They also took $500 in cash from Karen Howell's dad. So they had money, and this plan apparently to leave the area, to get out.
Money and a motive.
Money and a motive. So on April 6th, Sunday, they start driving south on U.S. Highway 23. They are in Joseph Rizzer's car, a Chevy Citation. And, throughout the course of this drive, they're talking about going somewhere far away, maybe to New Orleans, because Natasha Cornette had been there before. She's familiar with it. But they knew they needed another car. The car they were in was too small for all 6 of them, and it wasn't in good shape anyway. And they talked about stopping at a mall in Tennessee and stealing another car, which is, they told an interviewer kind of what they were thinking, right? They were stopped in Gate City, Virginia, where they got a speeding ticket. But, let them go. Hadn't really, I don't think at that point anybody had reported the thefts of the guns or anything like that. So they carry on, and about an hour later, they too pull into the rest area off mile marker 41 on I-81 in Tennessee. And it's here that they encountered the Lillard family. So according to witnesses, one of whom actually knew the Lillard family, you know, what happens is the 6 kids they show up first, and Natasha Cornett and Karen Howell go into the restroom at the rest area, and the other kids are basically outside milling around the vending machines. They're talking about, hey, we can maybe hotwire a car here at the rest area, but they're nervous about it because there's a lot of people around. And while the 2 girls are in the bathroom, the Lillelid family pulls into the rest area too. The little boy, the 2-year-old Peter Lillelid, apparently had an earache, and he's restless and crying. So, his dad gets him out of the car and is kind of walking him around. And Delphina, the mother, takes the little girl Tabitha to the restroom. On the way, they run into Karen Sinclair, who's a friend of theirs who was also headed home from the church retreat. So they chat for a minute, and then the women and the little girl head into the ladies' room. And as they're going in, Natasha Cornett and Karen Howell are coming out. So Vidar Lillelid and his little boy Peter are waiting outside. And they sort of encounter the 2 girls. And apparently, according to basically the testimony at the sentencing hearing from the killers themselves, Vidar Lillelid, kind of stops Cornett and asks her if she believes in God. And she tells him, no, God never answered any of my prayers when I needed him. So they start to engage in this conversation. And Joseph Risner and the Bryant kid, they're kind of watching from across the way. And they walk up as, the girls are talking to Vidar Lillelid, and he's pulling out religious pamphlets and kind of doing his, Jehovah's Witness thing. He's trying to witness to these kids, right? That's okay. So they pull up, and he starts talking to them. And Vidar invites them over to a picnic table to talk. So they, you're at a rest area, there's picnic tables. So they sit down at the picnic tables, and they're talking. The friend, Karen Sinclair, testified that she saw them speaking as she was pulling out of the rest area. She kind of waves and moves on. At some point, Joseph Risner leaves the picnic table and goes back to his car, the little Chevy Citation. Mullins and Sturgill are still sitting in the back seat, and he tells them, we're going to do something. Just be ready. And then he leaves again, and he walks back to the picnic table and pulls out the 9mm pistol they'd stolen. Reportedly, Risner tells Vidar Lillelid something along the lines of, sorry to do this to you guys. Everybody just be quiet and nothing is going to happen to you. All we need is the van. And reportedly, Mr. Lillelid is like pleading with the group. He's like, here, I'll give you my keys, I'll give you my wallet, whatever you want, leave us here. And no, they're like, get in the van. So, they herd the family back into the van. The wife and children are in the back with Bryant, Howell, and Cornett, while Risner is in the passenger seat holding a gun on Vidar, who he's directing to drive. And the other 2, Mullins and Sturgill, follow them in Joseph Risner's car. So Risner directs Vidar to drive on to I-81, and from there they basically go up to the next exit, and pull off at a secluded stretch of road, Payne Hollow Lane. It's like a country road near Greenville, and they order the family out of the car. At that point, again, according to the teenagers themselves, they basically start debating what they're going to do with this family. Should we kill them, or should we let them go? And Each of the killers tells a different story, as you might imagine. Everybody's blaming everyone else. But what essentially happened is whoever did what, this couple and their 2 children are lined up against a ditch along the side of the road and shot. The coroner later said, when he examined the bodies, said that he believed the father, Vidar, was shot first. He was shot 6 times, 1 to the side of the head and 5 in the chest in sort of a triangular pattern. And he received wounds from both guns, notably. Delphina, the wife, was shot 8 times, also from both guns. She got 1 in the arm, 1 in the thigh, and then 6 in the back, also in kind of a triangular formation. Tabitha, the little girl, was shot once in the side of the head with the small caliber weapon, and Peter, the little boy, was shot twice, also with the small caliber gun. And they're basically, that's what happens. It's kind of secluded. It's a country road, but there are neighbors nearby. So 2 people hear the shots, and they call 911. And they tell 911 they've heard shots and a commotion. And one of them reported seeing 2 vehicles, pull off and enter the road, but only 1 exit. So a few minutes later, police arrive, and they find the Lillard family in the ditch, Tabitha and Peter are sort of stacked on their parents. And there's it's a little bit unclear whether this was happenstance or they were placed there. Probably they were placed there.
That's my thought too.
Yeah. Prosecutors later claimed that they had been intentionally placed in the shape of an upside down cross. How would you know if it was upside down or not? It's out in the world. It kind of depends on where you're standing, but whatever.
Yeah. All about perspective.
But this is what prosecutors say. Police on the scene say that they didn't notice anything like that at the time. So they noticed that Vidar and Tabitha's legs had been crushed by the van as the killers pulled away. So they didn't just shoot them; they then ran over them as well. They go to check the family out. When Deputy Jeff Morgan touches Peter, the little boy, he starts crying, and they realize he's still alive. And they check them, and they realize Tabitha is also still kind of clinging to life. They rush the children to the UT Medical Center, University of Tennessee Medical Center. Tabitha kind of lingered on life support, but there was really no hope, and the family eventually gives permission for her organs to be harvested. So 1 day later, she's pronounced dead. Peter, however, survived. He lost an eye, but he did survive and eventually moved to Norway to live with his father's family. So that's basically what happened at the scene. Obviously, the killers have gone. They fled. Their car is still there. The Chevy Citation actually was stuck on a tree stump. I'm not sure, how do you drive up on a tree stump? Who knows? But anyway, so yeah, it doesn't take them long to figure out who's responsible. No. Because they left their car behind. They all pile into the van and drive south. They drive to Douglas, Arizona, and cross the border into Mexico. By this time it's Tuesday, April 8th, and they are actually turned back in Mexico because they don't have the correct paperwork. And they're trying to claim that they are lost. So Mexico's like, nah, go back. So they're turned back, and they arrive back at the U.S.-Mexico border around 5 p.m. Tuesday, April 8th. And they know. The Border Patrol officer, says that, Joseph Risner, who's still driving, basically has a look of resignation on his face because he knows, Border Patrol runs the license plate number, and they're like, get out of the car. So they search the van, and turn up toys, a car seat, and photos of the Lillard family. But also the 6 teenagers had some of their possessions on them. They basically kept them as trophies. Natasha Cornett had a photo of Tabitha and a piece of Vidar's belt in her wallet. Karen Howell had Tabitha's Hello Kitty diary, and Crystal Sturgill had the key to the Lillard's house. So, yeah. They're arrested here at the border and taken to Cochise County, Arizona jail. When asked her religious preference at the jail, Natasha Cornett said Satan. So there's that. And as you can imagine, news of it's a horrific crime. News of the arrest made headlines nationwide, and the media, of course, played up the occult angle and referred to them as Satan's Six. They were all over this, yeah. Also, Natasha Cornett's original defense attorney played it up as well because he wanted to portray his client as a mentally disturbed outcast and go for an insanity defense. Here in our area, in East Tennessee and Southwest Virginia and Eastern Kentucky, people were outraged, as you might imagine. In Knox County, Tennessee, a convenience store owner hung 6 nooses on a scaffold outside his business for them. And when the 4 adults in the group were extradited back to our area from Arizona to Greene County, a crowd chanting "Burn in Hell" met them outside. So, as you can imagine, it was a terrible crime. People were completely freaked out. And because of that, the judge, Eddie Beckner, ruled that finding an impartial jury in Greene County wouldn't be possible. Of course it wouldn't. So he'd ordered a jury to be bussed in from Bradley County, about 150 miles away, for the trial, which was set for March of 1998. But the trial never came because they all pled guilty. On February 20th, 1998, all 6 pled guilty to the murders. And basically, they were, with the exception of the 14-year-old Bryant, who was the only one not eligible for the death penalty. It was like, okay, you can take life without parole, or we're going for the death penalty. So they all pled out. 4 of them, Joseph Risner, Bryant, Cornett, and Howell, testified at their sentencing hearing, and they basically told the same story up until the point they stopped the van. And at that point, Risner, Cornett, and Howell, again, all adults, claim that, Howell was 17, the other 2 were like 19, 20. They all blame Bryant, the 14-year-old. And they say that he fired every shot. From 2 guns, fired every shot. Wow. And Brian, on the other hand, said that Risner and Mullins did the shooting, and that the others were basically planning to blame him since they got arrested. It's a conspiracy against me. Mm-hmm. The prosecutor believed that it was actually Risner and Bryant, so a combination of the 2, who fired the shots. But ultimately, they're all serving life without parole, so we don't actually know what really happened. We'll never know what really happened. But they're still in prison. And in recent years, a couple of them have actually tried to appeal for, basically to be allowed to apply to try to get parole. Because of some, recent legislation about regarding underage defendants who are, tried as adults and convicted and sentencing. But the state of Tennessee is like, no, absolutely not. You're not getting out. So those have been unsuccessful. So let's talk about the Satanism thing a little bit. Yeah. it's an interesting aspect to this case, and opinions vary. The detective who investigated the case doesn't buy it at all. He's like, no. The motive for this was robbery. They needed a car, and they were willing to kill to get it. The prosecutor, on the other hand, is all in. He cites witnesses who said that Natasha Cornett had, other friends who said she tried to talk me into a robbery murder spree too. And also he says there are resemblances between the triangle patterns of the gunshots in Vidar and Delfina's bodies and her scribblings and doodles of triangles and anarchist symbols and things like that. He believes it was, quote, a satanic initiation ritual. Notably, at the sentencing hearing, the killers denied that there was any sort of ritual involved. So, it's an interesting case.
It really is.
Wow. As someone who was a goth in our area in the late 90s, there was a lot of paranoia about that. Let me just say that, okay? There was a lot of paranoia. Hi, wears black, has piercings, etc. Didn't murder anyone. No murdering here, just so you know. But I mean, personally, these are troubled kids. They had rough lives and a lot going on, and it seems like, to a large extent, the system failed them, but of course that is no excuse for murdering people. And I kind of tend to agree with the detective. They wanted to get out, and their motive was probably they wanted to steal these people's van, and they were willing to kill them. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. That was kind of my thing. My takeaway was that, oh, yeah, we just want your van, and, we're going to let you go. Everything's going to be just fine. It's never fine.
No, it's never fine. And, hey, if you just want the van, we're willing to give it to you here. Bye, bye, bye. And no, they wanted to drag them away. So, yeah. So that is the horrible tale of the Lillelid murders. For this story, I read a lot of different articles. One by Matt Lakin of the Knoxville News Sentinel, who actually appears to be one of their kind of top crime reporters. I also read some of his articles that he did about the Zooman case that I covered in one of the previous episodes. I also read articles by Jesse Fox Mayshark for Weekly Wire, Wes Smith for the Chicago Tribune, and the Wikipedia entry. And I watched a short, hour-long documentary on YouTube called Six, which is really interesting. And they did a lot of interviews there with friends and townspeople, people who knew them from their hometown. And also, there was a lot of footage from the sentencing hearing as well. So that was enlightening. It's just to acknowledge our sources. Yes. But yeah, that is a terrible tale of one of our most infamous local murders.
Yeah, you really opened my eyes to that one. I was like, wait a second, something's striking a chord in my memory. And I went back and I studied this case, and I'm thinking, so looking at when this took place, I was a little young in those days, a little bit young in 1997, but wow, just seeing how raw this is. And
yeah, I was 18, and growing up in this area at that time and being one of the weird kids, a lot of us were accused of Satanism and things of that nature, which we were not engaged in. And if nowadays we know about the actual Church of Satan and how it's really not like that. No one's sacrificing anyone. But at the time, nobody knew that. And so, this is one of those cases where it's like, hey, yeah, thanks for making everything harder for the rest of us, jerks. Maybe don't go kill people for their van anyway. But yeah, I mean, it was a terrible thing. And I do remember reading about it at the time. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
It is. Wow. Taking a deep dive into that, just cold-blooded.
Okay, guys. Now that I've bummed you out, hopefully Sarah can cheer you up with something a little more lighthearted.
Oh, this is going to be a tall order after that, Cam, as always. That was just incredible portrayal of the Lillard murders. Okay, so when we were looking over these here, so to keep with the theme of Greenville, kind of keeping the Greene County area. Local. Yeah, keep it local, which is a huge, huge theme of our podcast. I want to do a little bit of digging. Had a few meetings in the past in Greenville, and which brought me to doing a little bit of digging into the General Morgan Inn. It's a place that's very, very mysterious, rich with history, just a place I want to learn more about, a place I want to stay one day.
We should go check out Greenville and stay at the General Morgan. It'd be fun.
Let's do that, because there are reportedly 3 ghosts.
3
of them.
Nice.
Taking a light spin on things, talking about the General Morgan Inn with a very, very rich history, we have the Green Room Grace, the resident spoon snatcher. So we go from cold-blooded murder to thieving of spoons.
That's a little less serious than murder and stealing a van. I'm much happier
just a tad.
I'm much happier with a light-fingered ghost.
Got that right. She's supposedly one of the more clever, playful ghosts who inhabits the General Morgan Inn. And the Green Room is part of the restaurant. And we've been told that during recent investigations that Grace, in her former life, she was a waitress at the original Grand Central Hotel during the late 1800s and the early 1900s. So here we are, a very happy, cheerful ghost, and about close to a dozen more ghosts apparently inhabit this hotel.
Wait, I thought you said 3. There are almost a dozen?
There are more.
Oh my gosh.
Hello.
Okay.
We're here. They just popped out on us just now. Haunting the inn for almost a century.
Wow.
She may have had some trouble managing her place settings. She sounds a little scatterbrained like myself. I don't know. I think she and I would get along very, very well.
I think you would too.
Yes. I know. I really want to go and get to know her. So apparently it's never a fork. It's never a butter knife. It's never anything except a spoon. Is it a soup spoon? Is it a tablespoon? Is it a sugar spoon?
So basically any kind of spoon. If it's a spoon, she's going to snatch it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You better believe it, Cam. And she only stays in the Green Room. She doesn't inhabit any other room. You can find these spoons in the weirdest of places. Sitting in your chair. Don't sit down without looking, or you might find a spoon on your rump. But you may find one just lying in the floor. I mean, I'm clumsy too. I could see that happening.
Yeah.
But wow, that was pretty hilarious when I read about that. And we have Front Desk Bill. So, adjacent to the General Morgan Inn is another hotel, and it's now referred to as the Depot Street Hotel. And it was built in about the late 1800s. And this is a grand reminder of the Great Railroad era. And this building, it's been closed for several decades now. It has, we've been told that there's a very charismatic fellow by the name of Bill, known as Front Desk Bill now, and he is also a former employee. He, let's see here. I'm trying to figure out some more about him. I don't know if I have as much in common with him as Greener and Grace. I mean, come on, he's charismatic.
You're very charismatic, Sarah.
Well, thank you.
Promise.
Oh. But yeah, so when he was very, okay, here we go. I see some parallels. He was very forthcoming. Just like to divulge lots of personal information. Just really like to get up close and personal with everyone that he met.
So he's an oversharing ghost.
Oh my. Yeah, he sounds like he is the oversharer of this establishment. And they're saying that, let's see. I don't know. Now they're saying in this particular Depot Street Hotel, there were 26 ghosts.
Okay, then.
We definitely have to go.
We do. We need to go investigate.
Alrighty, and he said that he was quite happy to haunt the hotel as well.
And who did he tell this? Who did he tell this to?
These were reported.
Oh, okay.
I'll track down some of these folks.
Oh, okay. So people who've seen the ghost.
You got it. And the one and only John Hunt Morgan, Confederate general. He was considered the Jesse James of his day. Tactical genius who raided the Ohio Valley during the Civil War. And he apparently died right at the location where the General Morgan Inn was built.
And he's said to haunt it now?
Oh, yes. Literally just a few feet from the hotel's lobby. That's where the grand lobby is where he perished. And he was out visiting some friends near the Dixon Williams mansion, which I think is pretty close to the hotel. So he left a few of his men a few miles outside of town, and it was a Williams family. He was unaware that a small group of Union soldiers were also staying in the small town of Greenville. We're all so fond of now. There are varying stories in this next portion. After claiming that the Union soldiers would not take him alive, he was shot in the back while attempting to get his horse, which is tethered in the Williams stables. And there's a little bit of snitch. Her name was Lucy Fry.
Okay.
She was publicly accused of betraying his location to the Union soldiers. She vehemently denied this accusation. It followed her the rest of her life.
Okay.
It followed her, and she was shunned from her social circle. Which, boy, that was an important thing back then, have your little social circle. And she became a social outcast and remained one the rest of her life. And Miss Williams, she was just a classic Southern lady. She took her hostess duties very, very seriously. She felt a personal burden that she should have protected Morgan during his stay, and she fell into a deep, deep depression. See, here we are going back in along the vein of the sad and the morose.
We just can't get away from it.
We just can't. And for decades after the incident, she was reported to have covered the site where he perished with her favorite wildflower, violets.
Okay.
It's going to make me cry now. Is there a ghost in the flower garden now? We got to investigate this, but wow, those are main key players at the General Morgan Inn, which, yeah, we're putting that on our calendar.
So there's basically the ghosts that they think they know who they are.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I want to meet all these others.
I know.
Piqued my curiosity. All right. So, okay, we're going to leave Greenville now. We're going to take a trip down 81. We're going to come back home to Bristol.
Back home to Bristol. So, yeah, tell us something about our local ghosts.
Boy, oh boy. So Cam and I, we bonded over several things. And, the history of Bristol, I moved here in the early 2010s. We spent a lot of time here prior to that. Just, falling in love with the history of the area and naturally the paranormal.
Of course. And for any listeners who are not local, you should know an interesting fact that Bristol is a city located in 2 states, Bristol, Tennessee, and Bristol, Virginia.
And apparently I've been reading, this is an excellent accounts of these stories.
I think that's from our local historian.
Yes.
The late Bud Phillips, isn't it?
It sure is. Our beloved being Bud Phillips. Ghosts of Bristol. We've got some amazing accounts in this text. And I was reading in the introduction, he was saying that before Bristol, Virginia, before they were incorporated into the Twin City that we know, I'm looking through the acknowledgments and the brief history. It was
Goodsonville, yes.
Goodsonville.
Yeah, Bristol, Virginia was Goodsonville.
I'm always curious driving down, getting ready to cross the train tracks, and you see, is it Goodson Street? There, Goodson.
I think it's Good Street. Yeah, it's the street the library's on.
Yes. There's Good Street, and then there's that one right at the intersection of State Street and about where electromechanical is.
Right.
That may be a Goodson. That's striking a chord in my memory.
Yeah, there's still, remnants of the old town.
Oh, yes. So many, going back into my memory banks as we're exploring this text, drawing up a map in my mind of each location and wanting to drive by each spot where these accounts have taken place. And one of the ones that really, really struck my interest, and I think one of our favorites, was Bristol's first known ghost.
The first ghost. Okay.
The very first ghost. And so this account, it was documented about mid-1850s, 1854 to be correct. There is a gentleman, the Moore family, John H. Moore, formerly of Russell County, Virginia. They settled in Bristol, Virginia. I mean, Bristol was up and coming. It was a very, very competitive time for businesses. From what I've read, they stayed opened up very early, closed very late. Just a booming town. Of course, from what I remember, some of the areas in Southwest Virginia, this is definitely the place to be. So they were seeking out their water supply upon breaking ground, and see, there's a couple of stores, they had one of their, let's see, was there a residence? Yes, it was actually an extension of a store. I was trying to remember if that was that detail there. But the water supply was a cistern located near their back door. And when they were there, they hired a water witch to locate a promising well site in the home yard. And
so like a dowser or something like that?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
And something very peculiar occurred. Mrs. Moore, going back toward that cellar door, she saw the figure of a very tall, very large gentleman, a Native American gentleman. He had a very pained look on his face, and he was pointing directly to a spot on the ground. And it shocked her, and it's made her completely unsettled. And when she was walking outside, she had a butcher knife in hand. I think she had just come from the kitchen.
Okay.
And it disappeared out of nowhere. Completely disappeared. And she's wondering, did this figure take it? I don't know. I'm just very disturbed by this. And she didn't want to really say, it's be that superstitious. And no, they needed the well. They needed to dig the spot. And she just felt very uneasy about it. Well, they ended up digging the well in that exact spot. And as they got deeper, they found the skeleton of a very large man.
Oh, no.
And, okay, at this point,
they dug up his grave to dig their well.
They did. They certainly did. And, she had shared a little bit of this with her husband, but so he was like, okay, so let's just cover this back up. Let's leave the bones where they lie and give them a proper reburial.
Okay. How'd that work out for him?
Well, things became peaceful for them again. No more visions, no more apparitions.
Awesome.
Wow. That was bone-chilling. But yes, this so many great accounts in this book. We have several different selections. Those were from the haunts of early Bristol. We have messages from the grave. Just highly, highly recommend picking this up and really getting to know our Twin City better.
Yeah, I have a copy. It's a good book.
It is. All right.
Is that what you got for us tonight?
That is what I've got. I'm
All
doing
right.
my homework for our next podcast.
Okay.
It's been a wild little week.
It has.
Wild couple of weeks to.
Yeah. I mean, you just started a new job.
I did. It's very, very exciting.
Exciting but busy. I mean, I know you've
been
doing training in addition to just like working your normal days. It's a lot. It's a lot to do.
Exactly.
But congratulations again.
Oh, thank you so much. Very, very happy, and getting into, how you just get into your rhythm and your stride.
Yeah,
that's kind of what's happening right now.
You're starting to get that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm finally if looking at me right now, Cam, is the deer in headlights look kind of fading away.
It is.
The
It is.
new territory.
You have had it for the past couple of weeks. You really have.
Yeah, it's starting to settle in and establish my rhythm, getting my stride.
Awesome. Well, that pretty much, I think, wraps us up. Wraps up the Little Id murders and a couple of local spooky tales.
Oh, yes. We thank you all so much for joining
coming.
us.
Be sure to visit our website at AppalachianArcana.com and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And again, if you have a story that you'd like to share with us or an idea for a story you think we should cover, email us at AppalachianArcana@gmail.com.
Thank you again.
Thanks. Good night.